what fails.
Okay. I mean, it's the build task. It's the generate proxy.
I believe you. And
Uh,
then if we get that repro, then I can forward it on to the tools guys, and also there's a guy on our team, Ramon, and we can see what the deal is and see if there's some way out of it. If anything, I'm curious if you tried for a reliable service that used
oh yeah, reliable
service
and yes, reliable services work fine.
with the service proxies.
Yes,
Interesting.
but there's specifically something about the way the build task works. It should probably try to invoke the DLL, not the one that's not the actual compiled,
Yeah.
platform to do its reflection from there.
Yeah, maybe something
Right?
in the target is just wrong. We can check it out. But file the issue and send us the number here in the chat, and we'll look into it after this Q&A.
Okay, thanks.
So
Thank you.
Clint posted a link to the issue.
Good.
Do you want to forward that to anybody right now? Or?
No, we'll capture it at the end.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. All right, question on Mesh. Could someone make a summary of what's new in Mesh? Last time I tested it was September. Okay, cool. So since September, we've actually had a few different things come in. First up was we, towards the end of last year, we added support for a second volume mount, which was with the local disk. So there's a Service Fabric volume disk that was added. We added auto scaling, and we've added the ability to have secrets. That was, I think, in November as well. So that was a pretty big one.
Front-end gateways.
Yes, and gateways. So those are the four. Actually, there's one more after that. So those are four big changes, and I think the fifth one is actually on the monitoring side. So today, your metrics and your logs from your containers can actually show up in Portal through Azure Monitor. So those have been the five big changes over the last 3 months or so. Generally speaking, we're taking a pretty big bet on Mesh becoming like a nice platform within Azure, which will support like a lot of different products and offerings that we have in the space as well. So some of you may be aware of the work we've been doing with functions to get them platted onto Mesh. We're continuing down that path with a few other different products as well, moving on. So some of our effort has been dedicated more on the internal side, but we are still making progress on various features. If there's specific asks that you have, so a couple of the ones that have come up more recently have been MSI integration, as well as allowing deployments to go across AZ or be like availability in additional regions. So we are investigating a few of those things and have been prioritizing accordingly. I think the MSI work is happening right now and is slated for coming in the next month-ish or so, depending on how that goes. But yeah, if you have any specific asks that you have, please feel free to unmute yourself, and I'm happy to chat through like features that might be of relevant use or based on the scenarios that you have, we can discuss. But yeah, lots happening, lots going on, a lot of momentum on the team in that direction. So hopefully we continue to show you guys some success. But also, just from a knowledge perspective, like Mesh is still a preview service. We are expecting things to evolve a fair amount. So feedback is super useful if you have any. Especially on the app model side, we're sort of stepping back and reevaluating a lot of the ways in which applications should and can be described within the Mesh world, as well as just Azure in general, and trying to come up with a way that we think might be better. So as that continues to evolve as well, we'd love to get your feedback.
Would that cross-region support also be available on non-Mesh? I guess the more classic approach?
Yes, so today I think cross-AZ support is the one that's likely going to come with the next release first. Cross-region support is probably going to take a little bit longer, and part of the reason there is we're also trying to figure out how we'd handle the sharing of secrets across multiple regions. So if you were to build secure clusters that span regions, you'd also need access to a key vault that had the secret for securing a cluster across regions, and today you can't access secrets from one region to another, I believe. So I think there are a couple of more limitations on that front.
So with the SF app MSI coming, that stuff should be solved. So
Okay.
I would say today you don't have a solution until build.
So at least I think after this next release, so we have a 6.5 that's coming up. That would likely have cross AZ support first, and then after that we'll follow up with cross region. Yeah, because the work that we are doing to circumvent the issue that I was citing is happening right now.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
We're already kicking tires and testing stuff, so it's just a matter of getting it ready for public.
Yeah, cool.
So I would like to ask two questions regarding networking in in Mesh. So first one would be if you plan to use dynamic addressing like in Kubernetes, that every pod, so let's call service gets a separate IP address, and when a service communicates to another service, it uses its pod service address. Initially, I was thinking that Service Fabric Mesh would use the gateways IPs when connecting to other services, but I feel like it will be rather towards the Kubernetes direction. So if you are going to use dynamic addressing, are you going to introduce something like network policy, like like Calico or something like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're looking at embedding basically a service mesh that would allow you to route, container-to-container communication or service-to-service communication internally without having to go to the gateway. So you should think of the gateway as kind of the access point from outside of the actual application world or outside the network within which the application is housed. So it's more of an ingress point to the application for communication within the application or across services or within or across containers that are contained inside that application. The dependency we're taking is on a proxy, effectively, service proxy in the form of Envoy. Or today, you could technically think of it as sort of how we have the reverse proxy in a Service Fabric cluster, or we have the DNS service in a Service Fabric cluster, where you aren't having to go out to get the public IP of a neighboring service. You're able to refer to it directly because of the benefit that you're co-located in the cluster. So I guess the answer to your question is not
partial.
Really. Yeah.
But
yeah,
the
yes and no,
second
maybe.
part, but the second part is if service communicates to the other service and there is no mesh resource, not route resource yet, so there is no proxy, and today we have communication between all the services. We would like. I am looking for a ways to restrict this communication, so like network policy or something like that. Is it going to happen, or are you going to look like let's restrict everything and let's communicate through Envoy gateways, Envoy proxies like in Istio? So is it going to be more like Istio, or is it going to be more like, I don't know, Calico?
I think today the answer is that it's more like Istio.
Yeah.
We do have work that had started that was around the providing little isolated virtual networks. So in that case, it's more like a Calico thing. Some of that is getting sorted out with between the Service Fabric team and the Kubernetes org. We're trying to put some of the same requirements on Azure networking so that Azure networking builds this once, and that then we only have to wait for them to do it once, right? It's not special or different between the different environments. So some of that work is going on over there. And then we have to figure out how in Service Fabric's world, we want to make that portable or consistent between Service Fabric and Azure versus Service Fabric and other environments. So the easier one for us to do is the Envoy integration, because everyone understands that a service mesh is a core aspect of a thing like Service Fabric Mesh the environment, or everyone in Service Fabric has to build these gateways today, and nobody really wants to do that. So getting the service mesh or the Envoy integration in first makes sense. And then we're figuring out how to do more integration with this more Calico or Flannel-like container networking primarily in other environments. So, I mean, that's also part of the thing, right? A lot of these networking plugins or networking models presume containers. And Service Fabric, of course, wants to try and solve things generically for processes as well. So that's an added piece of complexity. In Mesh, that's the same, but outside of Mesh, it's a little hard to figure out how to make that all work. And there's also features and capabilities that we're trying to get out of the core operating system. So you might notice the networking on Windows and Linux is a little bit different historically. So we're struggling with some of that stuff to try and figure out a consistent way to provide network level isolation. And in the meantime, the Istio or Envoy based proxy approach seems to be a lot simpler and is more easily addressable in the nearer term. Does that make sense?
Yes. So the first will be Envoy and the Istio-like, and then will be exploring network policy.
Yeah, and
yeah.
we'll see. And it might be one of those things that like it only
Mhm.
lights up in Mesh first, or it lights up in Azure, and then we have to figure out how standalone might work. But it is something we're aware of, and we
Mhm.
know that it can be more efficient. Today, the only equivalent is in Azure or in your private networking environment. You might have different, VMs in different subnets, and then you put NSGs on those subnets so that the two different subnets can't talk. That's the closest equivalent today. And of course, we want to get that to be more dynamic so that it's not bound to a particular VM scale set. It's more bound to an application or a service. And so that's kind of the work that we have to do. So we're aware of it, but the Istio based or Envoy kind of model will show up first.
Okay. Is it something related to the Microsoft SDN repository, the networking work you are talking about, or is it something else?
I'm not aware of that one, but if you point us to it, I can check.
Okay, I think I have pasted the link, and
Okay.
because I was trying to create some networks using HNS and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
tried to reference those networks from network policy or container network policy. In Service Fabric manifest, but it was failing to find the specific network with errors that don't exist in the internet. So so I think I went too far.
Yeah, I would hang on for that one a little bit. We also know that depending upon the version of Windows that you're on, whether it's like RS1 or RS5 or Server 2019, there's some pretty dramatic improvements with
Yeah.
HNS.
I'm trying to work with 2019
Yeah.
mostly.
Which is also pretty fresh. So I mean,
We are too learning about some
yeah.
of this.
So it might be something that even would work or should work, but does not work today.
Or we don't have proof.
Yeah, we don't have proof yet. Yeah.
Okay, so
Actually,
long story short, if you want me to, if I want to be mesh compatible and need to do something today on Kubernetes, unfortunately, then I should use Istio.
Yeah, an Istio or a Envoy-based thing or something like Trafic or something like this that serves as a proxy or an intermediary, those solutions will work better today on Kubernetes, Service Fabric, Azure, everywhere. The networking stuff has known issues.
Okay, thanks.
I actually could we just pause for a sec? I just realized since this is the first one in 2019, I think we should just go around and introduce ourselves. As well. Sorry to kill the momentum, but I think it'd be probably a good thing to do.
Yes.
Matt, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Matt Snyder. I'm one of the program managers on the Service Fabric. Too much coffee, or not enough. And I primarily work on the core runtime components, so failover manager, leader election, federation, replication, the collections, stuff like that.
I'm Servan. I'm also a PM on the Service Fabric team. I mainly work on the monitoring and diagnostic space, integrations with log analytics, App Insights, third-party solutions like Dynatrace, Datadog, etc.
Hey guys, I'm Deep. We're all PMs on the Service Fabric team. So I'm going to say this now so you don't have to. I work primarily on Mesh as well as on Service Fabric standalone, and now Azure Container Instances as well.
I'm Mark Fussell, and I work across practically everything, but focusing more on programming models at the moment.
Alexander Johnson, SFRP-based clusters and application reliability in the security engineering space, such as SF App MSI.
Cool.
Right, let's keep going.
Anyway, let's go back to I think we skipped a question from Clint.
Yes. Any progress on DNS, Docker DNS? Not working with the UDP checksum offloading?
Yeah, I know this one. This is a 1061 or something. Let me find it. It's this. Actually, well, Clint can tell me if it's this, but I'm pretty sure it is. I've asked about this internally. I don't have any updates on it myself, but we can see what's going on. It's interesting that you're running to it on outside of Azure. I haven't seen that, but I guess it's probably more of a generic Windows networking thing. We can check to see, this is also one of those things that might be different between server, RS1, RS5 in 2019. If you have the ability to create repros or see if it repros on one of those operating systems and not the others, that'd be good data. But I wouldn't, I don't have any other specific updates on this one, but I have started a thread already internally asking about it. So maybe someone, if we're very lucky, somebody will reply while we're still sitting here. And I will update you if they do.
So then Whit goes, is that a question or is it a reply? This might be exactly what was asked of.
It looks like they want to deploy a non-containerized .NET Core based application or service to a Linux cluster.
From a Windows dev machine.
From a Windows
Yes,
dev
so it's
machine.
replying to the question I had earlier.
And can this be done? Is there anything special involved for Azure DevOps to publish?
No, you're fine. Exactly what you said should be all right. Yeah.
Okay, so
Is that fair?
Great.
Wait, if
Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, it's just yes.
Dave's question is a little bit more complicated because he's trying to do it on a local machine.
And he was doing specifically actors, which apparently have a bit of some
Something
complexity there, but I'm assuming you are not using actors, so I'm just gonna say yes.
Yeah, no, just stateful and stateless services.
Okay, cool. So
Thank you.
Dan, PS,
Which is what I would have expected Dave's answer to be too, but
something weird with actors.
something weird. Yeah. Okay, we can go check that out.
Yeah, we've been using Service Fabric for almost 3 years and have grown in a single solution to about 20 microservices which with .NET Core is about 500 MB for full framework. Is there a better way to reduce this to not use full framework?
The .NET scripts don't seem to work. That's the part that I'm curious about, Dan. When you say they don't work, maybe you can provide us more information about what errors you're encountering. I mean,
is this all packaged in one deployment? Do you have .NET Core fully deployed all in one package?
well, I mean, that's the question, right? Is it actually .NET Core compatible, right? Is your code bound to .NET Core? And then, okay. And so then each service is now carrying around the .NET Core, and that's bloating the package. Is that the thing?
Yeah, so each one is a separate app, but it's compiling down to full framework to get the full XE mode. And if you try to use the shim examples that are out there, that basically puts out a command wrapper or a shell script wrapper that runs .NET and then the XE, it fails miserably. And we've tried a couple of different ways to do this, and it doesn't just seem to be starting up. And we're just wondering, like, is there a way to do it with non-full framework that's like on the roadmap for being supported, or is basically with the general direction towards containers? Like, should we just stick with full framework and look at containerizing all the different services?
So this is interesting because I've built a bunch of .NET Core samples that don't have to do that weird wrapper stuff. I still get an XE at the end of the day. Maybe it's that you have to change something about the compilation targets to say to produce a standalone XE. The other, that would at least get you out of binding against the full framework. I don't know why you would need to do that.
When I say full framework, I don't mean like full .NET framework. I just mean it's when it does standalone XE, it pulls in the entire .NET Core runtime for that when it compiles it, which then like brings the XE up to like 100 megs versus 40 if you do reliant on the .NET Core runtime on the VM.
Can you, I see. So can you not rely on deploying the .NET Core runtime onto the VM beforehand?
Yeah, so in .NET Core, there's a way to do this where you can say, instead of, they have two modes, basically.
Yeah, they pull everything into the package.
They have the SCD, self-contained deployment,
Yes, or they have the
framework-dependent deployment. I've got the link.
Yeah.
So what
We see that it works for that works for standalone services, but the big problem is like over half of them are actors, and starting up an actor in that mode almost always seems to fail.
Actor in which mode? Where it's where the framework is on the VM?
Right. So then non-full XE standalone mode.
I think that I'm not familiar with this issue. If you can create an incident for us, I can forward it on to Aman on our team and we can take a look at it. There shouldn't be anything special here. There really shouldn't be.
He just said actors build.
At build time, it blows up?
Yeah.
Or at
Build time
Deployment
is
time.
fine. It's deployment time. It starts with the DNX error with a long exit code, right when you try to invoke it with .NET with a .NET wrapper type of thing.
But you shouldn't be needing that .NET wrapper part is the part that I'm confused about. So I would say grab an incident, grab the DNX output that shows us the error, and then show us the service manifest that you have that's referencing the entry point for your code, and we can see what's going on. Because if I just go to VS today and like file new project, I don't get this .NET wrapper thing. I get an exe output
Sure.
that I can use naturally with either framework dependent or self-contained deployment. So you might be in some weird limbo space. Is this just incidentally, is this project like old? Like, I mean, you said you've been working on it for years. Is this thing like a VS solution that started years ago?
I mean, the project, we started the solution with probably some of the initial Service Fabric stuff like maybe 2 years ago, but we've been upgrading to the newest runtimes and libraries and things like that with each iteration.
So I would say get the errors and get how it's currently structured, send it to us. Send us the issue number.
But have you actually?
But the thing that I was going to say was just for pure binary searching through the problem space, just start up a clean, VS solution, file new project, .NET Core actor, and see what output it generates in terms of the CS projes, the SF proj, and the application package structure, and diff that with what you have. You might find that there's some cruft that's been ported forward from the old projects into the new one that's causing this.
That technical
That's
term,
an,
craft.
that's an official technical word.
That's a real word. That's a
Okay.
real word.
It sounds like you probably.
That is the Queen's English. I swear, Mark.
He said some things about stuff, guys.
I bet you've done that. I bet you've done. Have you done that, Dan? I bet you've done that.
Quick follow-up to that. If we were to think about moving these into containers, given that a number of them are reliable actors, are there still limitations with doing that and running it on Service Fabric Mesh, especially with Windows, or is that getting to be fully supported at this point?
We're still working on it. The programming models inside the containers still don't work fully, and that's part of that is because of how we manage state and the fact that the failover and state management logic are actually in system components that live outside the container. And so figuring out how to punch that through into the container correctly so that it's shared across those services, just like it's shared across services if you run as bare processes, is the work that remains. So there's a preview thing up there that shows roughly how to get it running inside a container, but that's not really the right model. That's getting the Service Fabric runtime bits like crammed into the container. And you don't really want that. You want them from outside on the host. So,
And it's also kind of not doing what a container is meant to be, right? It's meant to be a self-contained, isolated thing, and once you start punching holes in it, you're
right. Well, you don't have a self-contained thing anymore. Containers are really meant to be stateless. That's how they were designed, and so any sort of stateful thing inside a container is kind of going against the containerized model. Yeah. Those are things that we're fixing. Somebody mentioned the block device that we were building earlier. That sort of stuff is how we want to address state inside containers. So the programming model stuff inside containers isn't there yet.
Wait for a while.
Yeah, I'd hang on for that one. So we should figure out though why this regular deployment, it doesn't seem to make sense. So I would actually do that diff and let's see if there's something weird that's been kept for compatibility reasons that's actually causing this. And also grab the output, create an issue, and send it to us so that we can take a look at it. Feel free to get my email and send it directly to me if you once you open it, if it's past the end of this call, and I can forward it on and we can take a look at what's going on there. It feels like some weird combination of the old wrapper method because initially .NET Core didn't have this output as an exe thing. And so I feel like maybe something has been brought along there that doesn't need to be there anymore, but we can take a look at it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, yeah, thanks. It's gonna be a fun one.
Okay, let's
see.
We've done Martin's question.
Slaughtermere?
Yeah, we were on down to.
Under Wit.
What's the news on Envoy availability? Saw the video, talked about why we need Envoy. We don't have much around timelines. All right, so one of the tricky parts here is, as Vaz mentioned in the video, we've been working on enabling the service proxy side of things on Windows, and it's been like an effort that's not been as trivial. So it's taken a little bit longer than we initially expected. We're still working towards it. We've had some level of success already, hence the existence of the gateway resource that you see today in Mesh, which actually does have routing rules as part of it already. So some of the actual features that we do talk about in terms of Envoy providing, so all the stuff from the Ingress standpoint is actually almost all there, where you can set routing rules for TCP and HTTP. You get your public IPs as you want assigned, and you can control how you want to handle incoming requests. The part of it that we haven't yet been able to expose yet is the service-to-service communication side of things, where we're still reliant on some of our older ways of doing it, as discussed earlier. So we're still working towards it. I can't really give you any firm timelines because this work is not just us as a Service Fabric team, but there's also Lyft as well as Pivotal and a couple other people who have their hands in sort of enabling Envoy for Windows. So the collaboration means that I don't necessarily have timelines that I can share, but if you have specific features that you need to see lit up, we can discuss them offline and get you dates that would be relevant. Is that fair, Whit?
Yeah, sounds great. Could you post your email address?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the next question?
In Service Fabric Native, if I make an upgrade that only changes the application parameters, but not the actual code config data packages version, will the services get restarted during the upgrade? I'm specifically interested in what happens when a parameter is used uses environment variable override.
Yeah, that will cause, so basically the answer is it depends, and it depends on what that application parameter controls. So say that it was an application parameter that changed the target replica set size in a default service. No, nothing's going to restart. Say that it overwrites, well, I know, I'm just saying it depends, right? So say it overrode some configuration setting in your settings.xml. That will not, by default, cause the service to restart. But something that you only set when the process comes up, like environment variables, those will cause the process to restart. There's also a force restart or reset flag that you can pass on the upgrade to force it to be one way or the other. So there's certain things that you just can't change without restarting the process, and environment variables is one of them. Those have to get reset, or the process has to get reset in order for the process to pick up the new variables. Technically, maybe we could get to a point where we change them inside on your behalf, but that's not a thing that most services that rely on environment variables expect to happen. Like on Linux, I'm not even sure that there's a way to do that, where the environment variables are normally inherited at the time that they are spawned. And so that's what we do. Hopefully that answers that question.
Next question.
I think we're skipping all the way down to, there was an announcement in a very strange place.
Announcing easier way to use the latest certificates from Keyvault.
Is that just
somehow with SFMSS?
Is that a question or is it just a little statement?
I have no idea what that is.
Well, let's see
question. Some months ago, we were discussing different ways how to roll out certificates to VMSS and Service Fabric, and there was this extension that was polling for certificates and Key Vault. Then this extension has disappeared, and then it appeared in a strange blog post. And,
that was an internal extension that was made public for a short period of time and then yanked out of public preview, and it's not public today. So today, the way to get certificates installed on your machine, the supported path is using the OS profile secret section or declaration inside of your ARM template. Optionally, of course, you can use like a custom script extension and use the machine's MSI to authenticate to Key Vault and do your own bootstrapping. Some people do that when they have like private PKIs and they're not going to Key Vault, they're doing it some other route. Definitely if you're using Key Vault, I don't see the reason for using that. Use the OS profile and seed your certificates that way. That extension, if it ever comes back to light again, of course, there will be public information and we'll update our docs. Today, that's not something that.
Yeah, I think the answer these days is managed identities, right? I mean, that's the official way. I don't know what this was.
Yeah, and going, like I said, we will be announcing an MSI for Service Fabric soon, which they might build is something we should have more context for you and look out for that. But you should be looking for MSIs, not extensions.
And just to talk about what that feature is, right? It's integration where we do some of the hookup between the different applications running on the machine and the managed identity MSI stuff today. Do you want to talk about that for people who don't?
Yeah, I guess the best way to say that is some folks find Active Directory registering principles challenging. It's not, we have scripts for it, but that process does take some steps to interactively and authorization to interactively register a principal inside of AAD in your tenant. And MSI kind of simplifies that because now you don't have to do the registration process manually by running into your AAD. You can, in this case, it would be an ARM deployment where you would declare your application as a resource, and we can associate a system assigned identity to that application. And then, of course, you can use the output of your ARM template to grant it permissions to things such as Key Vault. Now you would have a unique identity bound to your application. Any service that supports AAD. This really just, again, circumvents the need for you to pre-register and get a service principal embedded in your code, or using it and use it, and running around authenticating what you need to. So yeah, you'll expect that to come to make your experience more native for authenticating to Key Vault or any other service that's in Azure to get it. Again, in case of using your private PKI or something like that, then you would have to have other options such as using the secret value research your mesh, or of course encrypting it and embedding it in your container image. But we can talk more about certificate container topic. Sweet. What's the next question?
Let's see here.
Okay, thank you. I think some keyboard noises were shadowing your speech, unfortunately, so I didn't hear everything out of it.
Do you want to repeat the key point?
Yeah, so the key point is there is no external public. There's no Key Vault extension that you can use.
Okay. Yes. And yes, this is important announcement. But also I wanted to ask: is the service managed identity for Service Fabric? Is it going to use managed identity itself? I mean, that are the VMS nodes?
No, same. So they're different.
Okay. Because I wanted to ask for security implications of that, but if not.
In this case, what you're asking is it's a normal question, and the reason why this feature is coming alive, right? Folks who need an identity, unique identity that is not shared, right? So they can build a
exactly.
Inside of a single machine. Today, if you use an MSI of a machine, it is distinct to the machine. And so anything running on it that's leveraging that now is a shared identity and it's no longer multi-tenant. And so yes, the SF app MSI would be bound to the application. That is the boundary. It would not be bound to the service. That would not be the boundary. And so you would have a unique identity per service. Of course, we will work in future iterations to allow user assigned identity to the individual services. But again, that wouldn't be a distinctive boundary. In terms of security reasons, within the application, there is. If you are one service within an application, you can reach out and take the identity of another service within your application. But if you are unique applications, you would have unique distinctive principles inside of AAD, and they would be the unique boundary. And of course, they'd be applicable to your services that are running, and they would be distinct. So that would be a boundary that you could have inside of a same VM.
Yep. And to be clear, like this is all technically achievable today. If you ran something as some system component that you trusted it could do this work, but that's a pain, right? And so we're automating it.
Yeah, it'd be no different if I
definitely.
and give you guys unique identities on the box and run each process as a different identity that's not admin, so they couldn't cross, then they would have the same kind of implementation, right? So you could achieve this today manually, but it's very painful.
Thank you. That's very good news.
I'm doing this right after this, February 7th. So yeah, it looks like, just to be clear, it looks like there was an announcement on February 7th from Andrew related to this Key Vault extension. So this just 2 weeks ago, that says the extension for Key Vault is now public. So after this, I will be following up with Andrew personally and doing some testing to see if this thing is now republic again.
Yes, this is why I
And-
pasted this link.
Yeah.
I like how the sneaky posts at night sometimes they don't get caught. But yeah, that was something we saw become public. We were told it was going to get yanked away. It did, and that it may not come back. It looks like it appears it might have come back. So I'll take a look at that and see what that's doing. That might cause redundant solution options, but we'll figure out what the details look like and make sure we give you a authoritative answer.
Yeah, and the point is that the scenario is still valid, and we want to make sure that it works.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Usama had a question. Can guest.exe's console redirection logs be written to a place other than the working directory? So can we take the initialization logs written to some logging provider to diagnose issues rather than remote desktoping to the VMs?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I don't see why not. A few options that you have are if you don't want to be remote desktoping into your VM to debug, you can use some sort of instrumentation library. I'm not sure if you're using .NET, but there's a App Insights SDK, for example, that I believe also picks up standard output, and then you can go view all of your logs. You get a bunch of other free data like exceptions and HTTP requests, load time, stuff like that for free. That's one option. Another thing is all of the Service Fabric native services come with an event source class when you create them. So you cannot even just add logging logic to those event sources. And then there are Azure Diagnostics agents that are deployed by default to the Azure clusters that can pick up ETW providers or the names of your event sources and then send that data on to either App Insights or Log Analytics. Those are just the Azure options. There are other third-party options like Dynatrace and Datadog that can read these as well. It really depends on what tools you're comfortable with. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think the specific, there might also be, I don't remember, it's been a long time since I looked at it. There is the console redirection tag in our manifest. I don't know whether or not that can be specifically used to write somewhere else.
I'm not sure, yeah.
I know that by default it writes into the working folder, but I don't know if there's a way to capture it and put it somewhere else. Are there logging providers that could pick up the file from a given location if you know where the location is?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay, that might be something to look at where
Yeah.
either we enhance where I can write the console logs out to, say I want to write them to ctemp or somewhere else in the application directory. And then if I write it to some known place, can I have some other logging
Some
provider
other
pick it up,
agent pick it up.
parse it, and send it somewhere?
Yeah, I think I need to investigate that more, but yeah, that should be possible. I don't think the Azure agents do that today out of the box. You'd have to probably that's not supported, or you have to configure them, but other agents are more
likely,
sophisticated.
yeah.
and probably will.
Okay, that might be something.
The next question is related to, is there any chance bring your own VNet to SFM will happen anytime soon?
Soon in what? In compared to what? I mean,
It's coming in months.
Yeah, it's work that we know is ongoing. I don't have an update from Sridhar or Dario recently.
Well, it's dependent on the networking guys.
Yeah, this goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier. Yeah,
A little bit of, the backlog of work that they have at the moment.
right.
I think everyone's trying to race towards this in the next few months.
Yeah.
But we don't actually have a date on it.
Yeah, not at this time.
So the next question is related to you're building an app and you really don't have performance requirements, but you have high availability requirements. And so you're looking at mesh and you're looking at SF clusters, and particularly you're checking out SKUs that you might want to deploy your application to or your clusters on top of for cost saving reasons. And so today we have best practice documentation around what SKUs you should be using, and specifically the D series what we recommend. And so for any production workload, the B series is not what you should be using. If you're using it for testing or standing things up, you're more than welcome to try some things out. But if you're going to launch production on top of this and you want high availability, you need to pick a D series or above.
Well, so I understand the guidance. I'm asking, will it function on an ongoing basis with a B series VM? Is there a reason to suspect, say for argument's sake, that you have one request per hour going to a web API on this, but I want to make sure that that request is met, and that if a node goes down, another one takes its place. Hence, Service Fabric.
Yeah, the notion of the idea of, like, again, auto scaling in place, like expanding elastically how much CPU you have or network you have or disk storage you have, is just not a supported use case. If you want to do that with scaling document.
Yeah, no, and to clarify, I'm not even really concerned about the scaling aspect of the B series. I'm looking at, because when the B series is not bursting, you get what, like a very small fraction of the CPU allocated to you, right?
Mhm.
So I'm working at that baseline level of, I can function as long as I get that low level of CPU.
You need a whole core, right? So if you're asking, could I stand up a whole core machine, whether it's a different SKU or not, with the right OS and log in and stand up a Fabric executable? Sure. Like with a Windows OS that's supported and running the process, it might start, but it's not a supported configuration.
I think
and you run into
Yeah, but
what might be interesting is you run the system services on D machines.
Yes,
Yes.
that's what
And then you have a separate SKU, you have a separate VM scale set that's the burstable ones.
Yeah.
I think that's the question you're asking, yes?
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, that was another scenario I was looking at, but then if you look further down, I actually took back my question, because I looked at the Service Fabric Mesh pricing again, and now I have two questions about that. The first one was actually realizing that the pricing was not same as Azure Container Instances. It's actually lower than that, so that actually puts it back in the realm of what I could do for an internal app. So that's great. So I'd love to use SF Mesh, but then I was looking through the docs right now, and there's still a 2-day limit on deploying applications to that. So obviously I can't put out an app and then I have to redeploy it every 2 days.
Hey,
Anything you can tell me around time frame for when that
so
restriction will be lifted?
I'll address both the points individually. So the first one is on pricing. So as you pointed out, there is a difference today. And also as a heads up, starting in March, the pricing for ACI will also be going down to being relatively close to that of a VM, because we don't want people necessarily just getting a full-fledged VM when you can also use ACI. The point of it is to give you that burstable compute when you need it.
Right.
So those things will start to conform, and then once Mesh also starts moving in a more mature direction, when we're ready to have more people run on it, that pricing will also conform very, very closely to that of ACI. It doesn't make a lot of sense for us to have those two compete with each other, because the kind of workload we want them to support is slightly different.
Right.
But at the same time, like, the way in which they'll be running will be somewhat the same. So there'll be more on that in that front coming up soon, but you can expect that the pricing will be relatively similar across, VMs, ACI, Mesh, the way we see it today.
Follow-up?
So
Sorry.
Sorry.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So right now the pricing page for SF Mesh says it reflects a 50% preview discount. Is that accurate to the changes you're talking about?
So the likelihood is that when the pricing will conform closer to these things will also be likelier when will happen at a point at which the 50% may or may not still be there. So the 50% discount exists purely because the service is not GA today.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then the actual pricing of the thing will continue to evolve while it's in preview.
Yep.
So if we get to the pricing conformity before we actually GA the service, then yes. And if we don't, then no.
Okay, gotcha. That helps.
And then, but also what should be pointed out is Mesh, as you think about it today, when you deploy an application to Mesh, there are things in there that are, in addition to the actual, the core and the memory that you use, there are additional value add services in the environment itself. So for example, the ability to use secrets, volumes, gateway, stuff like that, but also the service proxy and things like that. So those may still figure into the costing, which may result in a Mesh deployment actually still costing more in the long run, just because you're getting those premium services that you don't otherwise have to implement were you to use ACI, but fundamentally they should be used for different purposes. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, so then given that, the second part of your question was basically when will I be able to deploy applications to Mesh that last longer than 48 hours?
Right.
So the answer to that, unfortunately, is I don't actually have a date for you. Part of it is we're reworking some of our plumbing for it to be a little bit more efficient from our perspective, from a COGS perspective. So that's one of the reasons why we haven't changed that number yet. I will note that we actually had a go live program that we were accepting some customers for a little while back, where people that wanted to go into long running deployment or go into running in prod before we went GA was an option. We've since closed taking people into that, but at the same time, we are evaluating ways in which we can help some of those folks and maybe people like you who are in the queue of wanting to use Mesh get to a point where you can have a more sustainable deployment environment in Mesh.
Yes,
So,
that would be very
you know, the problem is like I couldn't say that I can give you an infinite lifetime deployment before we get to GA, right? Because part of the reason is we don't want people coming to abuse, you know, the discount on mesh and using it for, I don't know, Bitcoin mining, which may or may not have happened, right? So sort of the point is to basically say that we need to give you an environment where until the billing is consistent, until the environment is actually sustainable and supportable, we can't put you in it for a long amount of time and have you take a bet on it because we aren't yet. So to that point, like I can't, like maybe we can increase from 2 days to like a week, right? That might be something we might look into doing, but I don't think that solves your problem until we actually GA the service or give you an option where you can run in production, right?
Well, I wanted to add something. That we did take a bet on mesh. It's just that in its current state, it's going to.
Sorry, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah. So yeah, the answer is probably not ideal for where you are today. But we'll work on improving it as much as we can and get it to you as fast as possible.
So I guess if I can ask one quick follow-up, for people in my situation who want to use Service Fabric for a low-cost internal application, what's your most cost-effective recommendation for doing that on Azure?
You have the cluster, the core system services have to run on Ds because we need them to be reliable and available and to have adequate resources to do things like react to failures and drive upgrades and stuff.
Yep.
Then it's about the other VM scale sets that are also in the cluster, getting those to be right-sized for the workload. So if this is, you know, a one-core little web app thing, you could get a small D or a large, maybe medium-sized A, and run on those. You're getting what you pay for. So those machines are going to be slower. They're going to be using, you know, spinning Rust as the local storage.
Yep.
So your deployments will be slower, upgrades will be slower, and application performance will be less. Getting those VMs sized correctly and then getting something like Azure Autoscale tuned to the point where it's going to react appropriately, or the Service Fabric service level autoscale policies where they're going to react to scale requirements is, you know, a way to go. I think we've just seen the reason that you get hesitancy out of the team on this is because we get a lot of support calls where people have deployed their cluster on, I don't know, A-1s and then phone us up wondering why upgrades suck or it tips over a lot. And so we're pretty strong on our guidance that we prefer the larger, more dedicated machines. So it's not that you can't make like a B machine or a burstable series or low pri VMs work. It's that there's a lot of caveats when you do that, and we want you to be very aware of them so that when those activities happen, you know, when, say you picked low pri VMs, right? When they get ripped out from underneath you, is the application okay with that? Does it understand what's going to happen? And have you done the integration work to remove those VMs gracefully from the Service Fabric cluster? Because low pri VMs won't do that by default. So it's one of those things where we can't come out and say that like the B series or low pri VMs or anything like that is a good default for people, right? Because there's just too many caveats and too many things that go strange or that are different from what we'd consider more of a normal or mainline VM. But if you're aware of those caveats and you can take them into consideration for things like managing your environment, then there's nothing technically wrong. We don't block them, right? They're just not going to be there by default.
And if you look at it, you know, like what we're saying is it's minimum of 5 machines, right, for production of D series. So it isn't if it's truly like a WordPress size, you know, single internal app with a few hundred people, which you can get away with a single container instance running around, likely serving that workload with, you know, 4 to 8 cores allocated to it. Service Fabric in and of itself being a stable application distributed system is going to be too large of a system for the cost efficiency of that one small WordPress site. Right. So this is something where you might be able to get away with spinning up a single ACI container and serving your need, or go to web apps for the premium service offering to provide that small WordPress size internal site service. It's just when you need to scale, obviously those services would not scale the same way at a premium cost. Cost and efficient. There's a tipping point for sure, but I think with your use case, if you tell me you have 500 internal users and you want, you know, basically COGS efficiency of just some type of high availability, but yet, you know, not really worrying about performance, just as cheap as you can get, you might be trying to use a rocket solution being Service Fabric or something that could be us.
For sure, and I'll stop talking because I've taken up too much of people's time. But yeah, the whole reason for Service Fabric was even just as a proof of concept, so that other people on the team could experience the platform. So that was my reason for evaluating it. So thanks. This was all really helpful, guys.
Yep. Okay.
Lightning round,
because lightning round. We're going to speed up. Have you experienced using Traffic, or is it something that you would recommend for standalone cluster?
I've seen lots of customers deploy it and be successful with it. I haven't run it myself, but
it does work on standalone clusters.
Yep. And you've seen a lot of customers.
So yes, we have quite a few customers using this Traffic implementation of where we've integrated with Service Fabric, and you can use it both on Azure and on premise, and we would recommend you use that.
Yep.
Yes.
No.
I've received my question. Matt replied. There was some sort of point late last year to expose.
I answered that one down.
Okay, cool. Deep. Just a reminder.
Okay. Is there any plan to use gRPC more across Service Fabric generally? Not really at this time. Some of that may change as more things move to utilize Envoy and some of these other proxies that are very much happy with gRPC and have gRPC commands as their kind of control plane. But there's no like great initiative to go switch everything to gRPC. We might put a gRPC head on the Service Fabric management plane at some point, since we already have an HTTP based one that's not too much of a heavy lift. But again, there's no major initiative for that right now. Let's see.
Okay, then I think we answered the question about the 2-day limit on Service Fabric Mesh preview.
Yep.
That Deep replied to. Then we've got
Dan's gonna go check out what's up with .NET Core, which is good. Hopefully that unblocks you, Dan. If not, please do look and let us know and do the diff and see what might be going on.
Okay.
We're happy to figure out that one with you.
This is related to that full framework testing suite, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And did the audio die? No, we're still here. The way to register your own reliable dictionary, like if I extended to the current reliable dictionary and added some functionality, then could I ask for the extended dictionary by calling State Manager, get my custom reliable?
Yeah, I replied with an example to that one. So Jamie, today the answer is basically that you can extend it, but you can't have your wholly owned implementation. There's a lot of internals that the collections rely on that today are only inside of one. So feel free to wrap them and mock them out and do whatever you want with them. But you have to there's just too much stuff to do a full implementation today, and we don't have those APIs exposed. That's something that we do want to do, but it's just not there yet.
And then would you be able to ask for it via your own interface, like with the get method? With the get or add, I put get or add my custom reliable dictionary or something.
I think that's doable, but in that case, you also have to mock out the state manager a little bit. So you'd wrap the state manager around it. If you look at the example that I posted from Voss, he shows a little bit how to make it work. That code probably needs to be refreshed into a new project, but that pattern does work.
Okay. And then what would you typically do if you needed additional metadata for your new collection? Would you use a separate dictionary to store that metadata in?
Yep.
Yes.
So for example, just as a goofy implementation detail, the original reliable queue is really some metadata wrapped around a couple other reliable dictionaries, right? Mm-hmm. So it's pretty common that you use the basic collections as primitives to then build other things. Whether or not you wrap that up as a custom collection that you can talk to the state manager and that it would understand it's nice. It's a nice abstraction, but it's not going to fundamentally change that. This put is really a transaction that touches two dictionaries, one for the data and one for some metadata. That's pretty common.
Yeah, that's kind of what I did. I essentially created a linked list using a dictionary where the keys link together.
Yeah.
And right now my implementation kind of just has a helper that kind of works alongside the dictionary. I was just wondering if I could have just kind of modified internally the dictionary. And I use a separate dictionary right now to store first and last. And
You might be able to, I just don't know how much. It's a nice, it makes the code look better, but I don't think it changes anything about how it actually works.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of where I would be at, the code looking better, but.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
we're almost out of time.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes.
Thank you all again for your
Thank you.
questions.
Yep.
Recording will be posted as always on YouTube.
And see you next month.
See you next month.
It's February, so.
See you. Thank you.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Bye.
Are those library only reliable collections available yet? That was announced, I think, sometime last year. As
They're still in preview as far as I know. I don't think they're out yet.
Yeah.
okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.